Hello and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley, where we're going to continue talking about cataclysms and the end of the world and what can happen and what we can do
Let's
about
go.
it.
I mean, some people don't want to do anything about it because it's just like, humanity's terrible, you know?
Yeah, that's true. That's 100% true. I mean, fuck humanity, right? We deserve to
Eh,
take it on, right? Okay, no,
eh,
that's...
we- Oh, that's getting put on a watch list at some point.
Don't come raid
Look,
me, FBI! Don't do it!
look. Some pieces of humanity do need to suffer.
Oh my god. You're not supposed to say those kinds of things.
Just said suffer. I didn't say commit unalive.
Oh my god, don't commit unalive.
Yeah,
Can I commit resurrection then?
I mean, if you have the ability, you'd probably be considered like a god.
Oh man, that'd be so cool. I want to be a god. That'd be great.
I don't know how I feel about that. Like,
But
it'd be great to, like, have all the power, but, like, I have enough time with enough responsibility on my plate. I don't need all those, like, savants or, like, those crazies.
yeah, okay. That's a weird. Those are weird two groups to call. Okay. But also, folks, in case you hear me slur a little bit, I apologize. I had some dental work done, and my tongue feeling's not super great right now, so bear with us. Okay, so one of the things I kind of want to discuss ahead of time, is the fact that I want to discuss a little bit more about aliens. Okay. Yeah, I mean, aliens are a common theme in a lot of science fiction. I feel like I didn't do it justice last week, so I kind of want to touch back a little bit about this and kind of go over a little more detail surrounding what exactly could we actually do reasonably.
Mm-hmm.
So, mentioned last week that we could theoretically use our biology to attack them because, they don't have antibodies to us, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Not like they're not UFOs seen everywhere, and maybe they're picking up samples so that way they can, come and invade us and take our world and all its precious resources.
The subtle nabbing of bacteria.
Yeah, they're like totally like they're just trying to build up a resistance,
Just, one little nab here, visit like 10 years later. What new contagions do they got now?
One of the things that I kind of feel like I wanted to discuss that we didn't get to discuss was the fact that, like, if an alien race were to try and basically invade, I have to feel like eventually we would be able to pack enough of a punch to actually commandeer some of their tech and maybe even learn how it works and use it against them.
Maybe.
And I think that that's probably the way to go. And before last week I kind of mentioned the fact that you'd probably want to have small groups to be able to basically kind of coordinate with the other groups to be able to attack. And this is kind of like a form of guerrilla warfare. And in our past, this was a pretty good form of defending oneself against a larger superior force, and why I think it's reasonable to continue that particular thing in the event of alien attack, right? But there is something to be said about gathering all your weapons in one place and just fucking letting them go. Right? Just to take something out.
Sorry, the wording in my mouth was definitely an innuendo.
Oh, really? Well, let's hear it.
The thought process.
We have an audience.
I think I just let's ish. Yes, just let it all go. Just just shoot your shot.
Okay.
Just shoot everything, all at once.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely some people do that.
Blow your load all on the first go.
Oh my god. Okay, well then, yeah.
It was steadily getting worse.
Yeah, you're like steadily just increasing like the innuendo levels until it's like, okay, that's what we're going with here.
You need to stop. You need to.
How about new? Alrighty then.
Oh my god. Anyhow, so
It does really bad.
I mean, yeah, you could definitely shoot your shot. You know what I'm saying? the other thing to consider when it comes to aliens as well is the fact that, like, they might give us the opportunity to gain insight against other cultures. Because who's to say if there's aliens, there's not more than one type of alien race? And who's to say that all those aliens get along? And so it might be a way for us to, kind of get a door into some sort of, maybe, intergalactic negotiations of some kind or something to that effect. So, I think that, like, when it comes to aliens and an invasionary force, while the outlook for the people who live during that time frame is probably not great, the end result could be interesting. And so that's just something I wanted to kind of mention, because we always talk about cataclysms being terrible things, but sometimes maybe they're good things. And we'll get into an example of that later.
Dun, 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 dun.
Asteroids.
Let's go.
In fact, you know what? We're going to talk about asteroids now.
Ba-bam!
Yeah.
Look at that thing.
That's a bad day. That's several bad days. That is.
Sure that's not a couple bad months?
No, because after that's going to be like, let's just say not very habitable. You see when the ground is all like tore up like that, and you can see kind of orangish red spots?
Yeah.
That energy travels, outside of there.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So, let's talk about asteroids, and let's talk about comets, and let's talk about why they're an issue. What can we really do about it?
Okay.
So, first things first. All the movies, every single one of them, wrong. So wrong.
That wrong, huh?
Oh, yes. You're not going to be able to get people to go travel to an asteroid and nuke it and split it in half and dodge and blah, 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 blah. Armageddon ain't happen, okay? First of all. All right? Not going to happen. Second of all.
We just dead.
No, I wouldn't say that. I never said we're dead.
Okay.
But what I can say, and I think pretty strongly, too, about this is that there are definitely better ways of going about it than attempting to nuke it.
Goodbye.
There is a ridiculously large number of near-Earth objects that would potentially, at some point in our history, or in our future, will have and will collide with us. And there's a lot of things we can do about it. Number one, we can do something like what's been done with NASA's recent DART mission, where they basically struck it with a high-moving satellite and caused it to shift its direction significantly. And there's some great footage that we're playing of such an instant.
If you slowly scrolling.
Yeah. And that right there just kind of showcases an opportunity. Now, that's not going to work with everything, and it definitely won't work with comets. Okay? They're traveling too fast. They are detected after, basically too late. The reason why I always say this: comets far much scarier than asteroids, and the reason is because you can't see them until you got about a year, give or take, till they're going to hit. Sometimes less. Sometimes a lot less.
Depending on how fast it goes.
Well, not even like how fast. So, like, how we detect a comet, first of all, more often than not, is that we actually have to wait till they're reflective enough, or they start to give off, like, so their gases when they heat up as they get closer to the sun. And that's when we know they're there. A lot of times they're these dirty, dusty ice balls that aren't very reflective, and so they're I wouldn't say invisible, but I would say that they're very difficult to see.
Yeah. Oh, so they're in stealth mode.
Yeah, you can think of them like that.
And then we shine a flashlight over them, and I was like, oh, hey.
And then as they get closer and closer to the inner solar system, the influence of the sun starts to have a greater effect, and they start to burn off gases, and then they get those big giant tails that you kind of like see. What to do? All right, number one. All right, it depends on the size. So, if you got a big one, asteroid or comet, okay, a big one. If you're on the planet, get off. If it's like, say like about a mile across or bigger,
Yeah.
that is an end of the world circumstance here. That is
Definitely.
probably an extinction event, if we're going to be completely honest, where it's just
Snap.
or a sterilization of the planet is probably about to happen, especially if it's solid, and especially if it connects with a landmass. Now, connecting with an ocean isn't exactly better, okay, but it has a completely different result. And hi, Kyle.
Hello.
And so like if it's too big, right?
Yeah.
All right, then you're probably, like kind of screwed. However, if we're looking at like a skyscraper, then it's a bad day for wherever it lands and for the immediate vicinity, but you might be okay. Okay? So let's say an asteroid the size of like the Chrysler building decides to slam into Paris. Paris is gone. Okay? Paris is very, very gone.
Bye.
And a good chunk of the area around Paris is going to be uninhabitable. Okay? And you can probably say that if, depending on when it was made up and how much debris it kicks up, potentially could create some wildfires, potentially could cool the entire planet down significantly. Okay? But it isn't going to be the end of humanity. It'll be the end of humanity in Paris, but it isn't going to be the
surrounding
end.
areas for a little bit.
Yeah, but it isn't going to be the end of the world. And so realistically, depending upon where it goes, depending on how its density, kind of depends on the plan. So in most cases, if we're talking about, like, let's say an asteroid that is around that size, and we know, or we have a reasonable guess that it's going to land, say, in the ocean. And considering the fact that the Earth is comprised of about 70% of its surface area being water, pretty good chance. Yeah, pretty good chance. And so what would likely happen is you'd have like a hyper tsunami. So it'd be a tsunami several hundred feet tall that would spread just like if you were to throw a stone into a pond, the ripple effect, those ripples being hundreds of feet tall, and them going across the coastlines of the continents by which it would impact.
No thanks.
The larger the body of water, the worse the tsunamis will be. The smaller the body of water, not as bad. So in a perfect world, you want the Atlantic. Like in a perfect world, that's where you'd want it to be. Because yes, while it would wipe out a lot of cities, its direct impact, large scale, is going to be diminished in comparison to something like the Pacific, where you're going to have a large number of people, and it's going to be a big problem. So, yeah.
I mean, not that it's not already big enough to begin with, but...
Yeah. But let's just also, like, take a look at the fact that, like, if you go up a little bit on this, just roll up for a second, stop right there. That is a meteor crater in Arizona, okay? About 50,000 years ago, more or less, about a kilometer, potentially a little less, hit. Like I think maybe it was even less than that. It was like
It says about 50 meters impacting Arizona.
Yeah. But I mean, it was like a small thing, and it left a giant. Yeah. This is huge. This little picture here doesn't do this
about
justice.
More than a kilometer
in diameter. Yeah.
And this 200 was like, meters deep, apparently.
Yeah. And this was I believe it was like an iron or nickel. It was a metal asteroid.
It's primarily composed of iron and nickel.
Yeah. And this was like one of those dense ones, right? And I remember like there was prospectors that were looking around, like, when this was first kind of like looked around in the 1800s, they were looking for pieces of metal that were big. They assumed that there was going to be a big giant like hunk at the center of this thing, but all they do is
seen games.
Oh yeah, all they found were small fragments because it basically busted into a bunch of pieces as it was going down and vaporized a huge chunk of it as well. Sorry,
sounds like a shrapnel grenade.
kinda, and that's really what happens to a lot of these smaller asteroids, right? So imagine, something like this, right? Except for instead of it being like, there in Arizona, it happened in like, I don't know, Paris, New York, major city, some kind. Bad day. Now imagine it not being the size of like like a little bigger than a school bus, but instead it's the size of the Chrysler Building. The hole is going to be a little bit bigger.
A little.
A little bit bigger. It's going to go a little bit further down. It's going to be a bad
Only
day.
a little.
Okay, it's going to be a lot.
It's like this thing's only 50 meters, but it like went 4 times as much deep wise, and it's like about like 200 times in diameter.
Here's another thing to also consider. You want to be nowhere near this thing as it re-enters.
No.
Depending on how dense it is, it could displace so much of the atmosphere that it could potentially catch things on fire, including you.
Oh, lovely.
You don't want to be.
That's how I want to go. Just being set on
I mean,
fire.
honestly, like, yeah, I'll be 1,000%. If you had a decision between being vaporized or being killed by the impact and like concussion force of like maybe displacement of air, I'm definitely choosing the vaporization because you ain't gonna feel that one.
Yeah.
The concussion,
for like
you might
half
feel.
a second, but you're gone.
Yeah, but like it'd be like a concussion. You might feel the shockwave that kills you. You might, if you were close enough to it.
It'd be a quick one.
Depends. I mean, like, can you imagine like you get crushed, but you're not dead, so you're suffocating for an hour, for like a minute and a half or something like that.
Oh, gross.
So you become asphyxiated.
How about no?
Yeah, not a good thing. Honestly, like the thing that I would say when it comes to this is that you'd want to try and find about where it's at, and you'd want to leave that part of the planet as much as you could. Yeah, if you were like, okay, it's going to go over the Pacific, then you get your ass as far away from the Pacific as you can.
Bye-bye, I'm taking a trip all the way to England.
And you want to get into somewhere that's high ground too. Like,
We're going into the mountains.
yeah, honestly, I'd go into the Swiss Alps. If it was going to the Pacific, like that, my goal would be the Swiss Alps. Because you're going to be able to get high enough and far enough away from most of the effects.
Mm-hmm.
If it was there. Now, let's say it hits like somewhere in like, say, northern Canada, then your best place might be like Australia. So, it kind of depends.
Just take your points on the globe and go directly across to the other side of the world.
Yeah, pretty much. You just want to go opposite. I mean, obviously, here's the other thing
Pray
too.
you don't end up in the ocean.
Here's the thing too. No matter what during one of these events, it's going to affect the climate dramatically. Just like with super volcanoes, like we talked about last week.
Yes.
And with nuclear weapons, you're going to have a very harsh set of seasons immediately following this, and probably for several years, if not decades. Because you're having a major shift in the overall composition of the atmosphere, and when that happens, there are unpredicted effects that, we can't really know 100%. And so it's really important to be able to kind of understand this. The other thing, the last thing I really want to talk about when it comes to this, it has to do with, like, what could we do about it other than, obviously, nuking it or pushing it out of the way. Well, one of the things that we could potentially do, specifically when it comes to comets, is the development of high-powered lasers that we could focus the comet and actually slow it down. By heating it up, we can actually create kind of like an ejection of some of its gases at the area we're pointing to, which would technically kind of like thrust against it, which would potentially slow it down, so that way instead of it hitting us, it misses us.
Oh, well, alrighty then.
Because we don't have that much time
Just
to
hold
kind
it
of
back for like 10 minutes.
not even 10 minutes. If it missed by a minute, would be enough time.
Ah.
Earth is fast. It's whipping around the sun.
Whee!
Depending on how big it is and how fast it's moving, of course. There are some numbers here that you'd have to kind of figure out. But I think the development of high-powered lasers, enough to be able to actually direct something in that way, might be some technology that I know that's being developed. And if we put more funding into it, it might be a way of answering the peskiness that's associated with comets, because they really are last minute. I mean, like, while they're out there for a long time, our ability to detect them is very
limited.
It's in its infancy. Yeah.
It's a little baby.
Yes. I'm sure as we get better, there will be more solutions, but those are some of the ones that I can immediately see.
Yeah.
And there's probably other ones too. So if you guys have any questions or any comments or things you'd have to say in regards to asteroids or comets, feel free to throw them. in the comment section, or if you're watching it live, then throw it on the thing. We'll see it on screen and we'll address it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next thing. Now, this next one. This is the cataclysm that, honest to God, keeps me awake at night. This is the one that, like, honestly, like, there's no answer for this right now. Not really. And it's gamma ray bursts. Now, you may ask yourself, what the is a gamma ray burst, and why do I not know much about this? Like, I'm pretty sure you probably heard in science fiction or maybe in a random science thing about a gamma ray burst, but you probably don't know exactly what it is. The best way to describe what a gamma ray burst is, imagine all the nasty, super highly energetic, very bad wavelengths of light being hyper-focused into a beam that sweeps the universe. That is basically a gamma ray burst in what it does. How they form is a little bit subjective because they can happen in a bunch of different ways.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So
Make a death ray, and there's not even one way of creating the make a death ray.
yeah, there's a few.
Lovely.
So neutron stars that collide could create them. Black holes could create them. There are, if you had two big stars that were big enough, theoretically, it could do it. And then also, supermassive black holes have been known to eject like highly dense beams of energy every now and then. So there are some.
You know.
There are some. There's also a lot that people don't know. There's some things that we do understand.
Yeah.
And there's some things that we can theorize. And then there's sometimes where we have no idea. They just kind of happen. In fact, one came by the Earth not too long ago.
Oh,
We missed it by like 14 minutes.
Oh.
So yeah. Okay, so let's take a second to address Kyle's question before we continue on with the gamma ray burst thing. So some things I want to talk about with gamma ray burst, but let's talk about Kyle for a second.
Alright, so I put a question in the chat, which was, what's your favorite cataclysm to discuss? You know, because we've only got maybe a handful, but there's plenty of others.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kyle responded that their favorite cataclysm to discuss is the fertility crisis. Why is it considered horrifying if people can't or don't have kids? Humans would end, but not horrifically.
Oh, that's actually a really like basic. I mean, okay, I know why it's bad, and I also know why people are worried about it. But it stems from three. It's actually it's a catch-3 question. So the first reason why it's bad is because our world is based on a type of industry and a system that has a certain population of expertise. So if you have a shrinking population, it means that perhaps when you get older, there'll be fewer doctors, fewer pharmacies, fewer nurses to aid the elderly. Which, if you're young, then you don't give a shit about. But when you become older, you probably will. And if you find yourself 65 standing in line and there's 100 people in line at Walgreens, you're to blame if you didn't have kids. You played a part in the problem. But I mean, outside of the obvious to associate with that, the second part is geopolitically. Now, our world is stabilized right now and has been since about World War II because certain countries seceded their power or chose not to enforce their power, and some countries did. And the countries that did had specific, birth rates and stuff like that. And they had people to be able to back it up. And I'll get to that robot thing in a second. I see it. But more importantly than that, right? It's really the geopolitics that decide which countries are the best. I believe in about 50 years or so, I think it's like Kenya has it might be a world power because they have one of the larger birth rates. I know that China was seen like as a world power, and maybe it will be, but I do know that their birth rates are going to dramatically decrease over the next 50 years, and their population is going to be cut in half. And that's a big deal when you consider the fact there's about 1 billion people in China. So the fact that 500 million people are going to be out of the working area and potentially dead is a huge problem. And that kind of gets into the next problem too. Basically, our civilization and human species as itself requires a level of genetic diversity that would allow it to continue to propagate. If the population dips below 20,000 people, which I know sounds crazy considering we have almost 9 billion, but if it ever does, then we dip below replacement and go into extinction. Because eventually there wouldn't be enough people with different genetic genomes to be able to have viable offspring. And so eventually you'd be kind of almost having like offspring with close family members.
Ew.
And eventually those family members would develop degenerative diseases, as we've seen, like say like in the royal families, for instance, with the deterioration of like certain portions of the jaw and certain other features that we see that are just not good that happen when inbreeding takes place. And so population numbers have a huge role when it comes to that because they allow for biodiversity. There's another thing that also kind of plays a huge role when it comes to having a decent sized population. And that is the fact that if something terrible does happen to society, like a world pandemic, a significant portion of the population is likely to survive even those conditions. Or hell, even a supervolcano or an asteroid collision. By having large numbers of people, you ensure the viability of the species. If people don't have kids, then it means that there's no one to replace. And that has long-term implications that are extremely negative. So that's at least the take that I've heard about it. But if you have anything to like specifically state about this, feel free to comment more. And then as for automation, I'll get to that. We'll come back to that. Okay.
All right. We'll wait.
We'll wait. Yeah, I know. All right, let's continue about the gamma ray burst stuff. So, let me talk to you about why gamma ray bursts are so deadly. So, obviously, beam of highly charged, highly disruptive light doesn't seem like a bad day.
Big boom boom.
Well, let's put it this way.
Maybe.
They attribute one of the 5 extinction events to a gamma ray burst. I don't know what happened. It's super weird. Perhaps, Kyle. So let me know if we're back.
I believe we're back because it's now completely updated. But...
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully everything
is a thought.
Okay.
Goodness gracious.
Hey, you know what though? That's totally fine. It makes sense. You know what it is? Big Mama YouTube decided, hey, we're having too much fun talking about the end of the world. Gotta cut us down, man.
They decided no.
Yeah, it was a big no right there. Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Yeah, we are back. We are back. Sorry about the technical issues. All the funness associated with, big tech out there. Right? You're like, how dare you talk about gamma ray bursts? I'm talking about scaring people. How dare you? It's going to be a big old threat, man. Going to be a big old threat, man. What the heck's going on?
I'm not quite sure at this point. Oh, that one.
Okay, cool. All right.
Right.
Okay, so
goodness gracious.
Let's get back to the talking points of what I was getting at when it comes to gamma ray bursts.
Yeah.
So, the reason why gamma ray bursts are so scary has to do with the fact that gamma ray bursts are like having a microwave cook one side of the planet. Now, it could be 10 minutes, could be an hour, could be a minute. But typically, a gamma ray burst is so bad because it's going to sterilize whatever side of the planet it's hit by. And within one revolution, the whole planet becomes uninhabitable.
Yikes.
Yeah, because you've basically destroyed an entire side of the planet, the atmosphere, everything. It's all
we have a
toast.
picture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Extra toasty.
Extra toasty.
Extra.
Extra toasty. You still want to be on that side. But there are some solutions. Okay, realistically, there is one actual solution for this, in my opinion. One. The solution to this would be to create an arc ship, a generation ship, a ship where people basically go to a place where they believe there to be an Earth-like planet, and they spend multiple generations living on a ship, living their whole lives on a ship in pursuit of the new planet. Because Earth wouldn't be habitable for a very, very long time, if ever. And realistically, that's something that you just need to go away. And the way, there are problems I'd have with this personally, all right?
Yeah.
Now, I kind of when we were planning this particular episode, I kind of was going to say something along this particular lines in regards specifically to, aliens, right?
Yeah.
As a way of kind of ducking aliens, you maybe, leave, and come back, hopefully, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the issue I always have with this is that the people who set off on the journey aren't going to turn the boat around. But that's not to say that 5, 6, 7 generations in, people don't go, I don't want to live my life on a ship in an artificial environment. I want to go back to Earth. And then maybe they don't believe that Earth was destroyed or something like that. And so they go back, they turn the ship around, and maybe everyone dies.
Goodbye, sayonara.
Yeah, not to mention the people who turn the ship around aren't even going to live to see what happens, right? And so the point I guess I'm trying to get at is the fact that the only way to survive it in that situation is to live off-world. Now, the other solution isn't necessarily an arc ship, although I think the arc ship is the smartest idea, because I think afterwards you don't want to stick around. But let's say you want to stay in the system. Then you'd have to build some sort of giant living, a habitable zone in orbit somewhere, within the orbital trajectory of the path that the Earth travels around the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So that way you're still in the habitable zone. And that might be a way to do it, maybe, to survive one of those events. But the problem is that we got to get off this planet, no matter what. We need to be a multiplanetary species, or we need to at least be a spacefaring species, because we're not really a spacefaring species by the sense of what it really means. We cannot actually live in space. We can go to space for short periods of time and then come back, but we can't actually...
Really slow.
Yeah, we can't live and propagate in space. We need to figure out how to do that. And we need to do that soon. because
quickly.
Because right now we're on Earth, and we're one big target for a really bad day. And I would say, trying to split us up a little bit might be a good idea. So,
That old adage of don't split the party, not the case here.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, so that's pretty much the gist behind the gamma ray bursts. The reason why they keep me up at night is because right now there's nothing we can do about it if they were to happen. So if they happen tomorrow, we're all dead. Everyone's dead. There's no coming back. It's done. And considering the fact
I don't have to deal with my loans.
That's not an upside. And I think that at the end of the day, life probably wouldn't get to a place where it'd be able to get off the world before it's too late. The Earth is only going to be habitable in a good day for another billion years, probably less. As the sun essentially grows brighter, as it starts to go into middle age and get older, the sun will eventually get too bright for Earth to be habitable anymore, and so the oceans will start to slowly vaporize, and we'll probably turn into a Venus-like world, and it'll no longer be a place. That's a billion or less years from now. Now it took roughly 4 billion years for life to get to a place where we are today. And all of its, shortcomings and stuff like that. I think we're realistically life's best chance to propagate in the universe. And so it's a kind of our moral responsibility to do something about it, which is why it keeps me awake at night, because I know how vulnerable we are and why we should be working to do something about it. Okay. Enough talking about dreary gamma ray bursts that keep me awake at night sometimes. Unless you have any comments or questions about it, or if anyone has any comments or questions, Kyle, if you have anything, feel free. And if you're at home, feel free to message in the comment section if you're watching this in the future. But,
All right.
Rose, do you got anything?
Just a lot of screaming mentally.
Yeah, I can understand that. Okay. So.
Also, the thought process of how to go about fixing things is a little bit going like.
Yeah, it's not really a fixable thing. That's like your best shot is literally learning how to take raw materials and find ways of making practical use with those raw materials while in space. If you can do that, then you got a shot at making a habitable system.
Just a shot.
You got a shot. There's a lot more building blocks, but I think when it comes to like the human body and being able to survive in space, I think we got a basic idea. You create artificial gravity by spinning something to create artificial gravity. That'll fix a lot of the problems that we know about.
All right. No, this reminds you, Kyle, of the SCP Foundation story about the Earth completely dying.
Interesting. I don't know anything about that story. What's it about? Feel free to.
Didn't have to wait on that one.
Yeah, feel free to like let us know. Okay, so Kyle, we're gonna circle back to the whole robots and automation could help aid the elderly of the Earth, right? The next thing we're gonna talk about is AI. Yes, the age-old artificial intelligence. This is, in my particular opinion, though, the biggest threat of all. The list that we had starting last week, working our way through, was basically a list of things that we should be concerned about, from the least risky to the most risky, based upon my opinion. You know, it's not an actual fact here, but like it's my opinion about it. You're feel free to dispute it. If you have your own list of what you think is from least to worst when it comes to devastation to the Earth, or danger level or threat, feel free to throw it in the comment section. Love to hear about it. But this is my list. This is what I think. And I do think AI is the absolute biggest danger. And the reason for that is not something that I think a lot of people would necessarily jump to. And I'd be curious to see if anyone actually agrees with me on this and also be in the same line of thinking. My thought process for why AI is so dangerous is not because I think that they're going to come wipe out all humans and say that we're inefficient. I don't think I don't think AI is going to, turn into some, bloodthirsty monster that's going to wipe all life off the face of the Earth and make everything artificial and, perhaps propagate the universe, right? Like von Neumann probes.
Mm-hmm.
What I actually think is that they're going to create the conditions by which humanity will cease to grow. It reminds me of the fact that some people that I know, and there's some people that I'm pretty sure other people know, that don't cook anymore. Why do they not cook anymore? Because it's easier to go buy food. It's easier to go do that. So instead of learning how to be, culinarily gifted, adapted perhaps, knowing how to cut knives, they just go and buy fast food, or they go and get their meals pre-made. This makes you lose a piece of your humanity, in my opinion. And I think that's exactly what will happen. I think automation, AI is going to make life easier, not harder, not more threatening, but the part of us that really wants to go and do something, not because it was easy, but because it's hard, is going to be gone. I think a lot of people are going to lose motivation, because as things get easier, what's going to drive you? What's going to make you want to do something? Like, we already can see it when it comes to math classes. You know, you tell a kid, hey, I want you to go learn algebra. They're like, cool. They get like go on their computer and they type in, like, say, like a Tiger algebra program, plug in their equation, it spits out the answer. They don't care. They didn't learn. They gave the answer that they needed, but they didn't learn it, and they don't have an interest to it. That's why math scores in the U.S. are just abysmal, because we've removed the drive, the need, necessity for it, and I think that's going to happen with AI in every facet. And I think that in some ways can be considered a good thing, especially if you're talking about like automating a repeating task. You know, so that way someone doesn't have to live their whole lives in some dreary factory doing the same thing every day for decades as a career. But I also think that those sorts of areas run other risks as well. And so I guess this in some ways can tie in to the whole elderly. Do you really think that a robot is going to be able to deal with all the things that you would need? And would you really want an artificial, something that was engineered to tell you? I don't know. I wouldn't. I would rather a human person, be able to examine me and tell me what's wrong. And if they're assisted by robotics, AI in surgery, that's fine. But there's still a human at the helm. There's a person who can make decisions.
A human aspect.
Yeah.
That you can connect with.
Yeah, I mean, errors can happen, humans or robots. But for me personally, the human touch is important. There's something that we can do that I feel like AI probably never will. And it's at least something I don't think I'd ever be able to trust. What about you?
It's kind of, AI, difficult to program, difficult to see if it really works. Of course, there's the human error, because human error happens in just coding in general.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of times I've had to debug my own code. And they're not just like quick fixes either. It's like, oh yeah, this is going to take 5 minutes. 5 hours later.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I mean, like, to me, like, that...
Like, as soon as one starts malfunctioning, it's just going to be disastrous.
Mm-hmm. But would that be true of AI?
It depends on whether we'd be able to code the actual, like, self-learning and get it to, like, actually self-learn in a way that's more positive, because, we've got programs now which are self-learning, and sometimes the result's not what we want. The most common example I can think of, not even common, it's more of a viral example, is this one video of somebody explaining, using like a children's toy, what self-learning sometimes does. It's put a shape into a hole. In this case, the video is essentially a human hand, put the square in the square hole. Perfect! Absolutely what we wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grabs a new piece, it happens to be a circle. We would want the machine to learn, hey, it goes in the circle hole. It just so happens to fit in the square hole. Took an oval piece. Would want to put it in the oval hole. No, it happens to fit in the square hole. So, like, if it doesn't match it precisely, it'll just go with whatever works. And, that's not always the thing you want, especially with, how many medical problems people have and how different they are.
And how similar they can look.
Yeah, so it's just like, oh, it'll, take a list of these symptoms and maybe misdiagnose. And it takes so long to train those things to be even close to like 90% accurate.
Mm-hmm.
You'd want it in the medical field to be more than that.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I mean, artificial intelligence can mean a lot of different things, too. Some people say that artificial intelligence already exists in the form of a chatbot.
Oh, yeah, the chatbots. I know. I had to research that over the summer. That was an interesting concept. That one's a lot of back and forth coding.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, to me, like, when it comes down to that, I think that there's some advantages to having this discussion. But I think at the end of the day, it's all about what you're comfortable with. And to me personally, I don't think AI is ever going to be something that I'd be super comfortable with. I think it has benefits. I also think it has drawbacks, and I think the drawbacks are greater than the benefits. Because I don't think I could ever put a price tag on the resourcefulness or the imagination of humanity. And I think that that's something that we stand to lose with the creation of AI, and something that if I had a magic wand that I could just wave and turn on and prevent ever from happening, I think I would.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I see Kyle has a response to that.
Yeah, it was for I think the question from earlier, the whole SPC Foundation story. Imagine all life dies suddenly. Not even bacteria that would decompose dead bodies survives. People sitting for meals die with their bodies and food completely preserved. Only the wind changes. Yikes.
What would create such an agent, though, that would make everything inert?
Who knows? I don't want to think about it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, like, something that would basically kill everything off and allow it to perfectly be preserved. I don't know what that would look like. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but I wouldn't know the conditions, because there are plenty of life forms that can exist in the vacuum of space. Like tardigrades, for example. That's something that exists on Earth, but they also can exist in the vacuum of space. So, like, if that were to be the case, right, then, like, you know, that's a mystery in the story.
You find out at the end.
Right, what is it, God snaps his fingers? I now declare everyone's dead.
Sorry, it just sounds like a more powerful version of what happened in the anime Dr. Stone.
Oh, yeah, what happened in the anime?
There was this device that could be used to essentially petrify all humans, but it would completely kind of preserve them to the point where, spoiler alert, one of the characters was essentially dying. They cryogenically froze him, used the device to completely petrify him, and then revive him completely fine.
Huh?
So it's just like, this just seems, but it was only really, it really only affected, like, humanity for the most part. But it didn't really touch any of the, like, animals.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's really
weird. Yeah, so it's like, this one kind of seems like a more, like, powerful version, because this one seems like it would make everything inert, not just humans. So. There
is one benefit to AI, though, that I want to mention before we close the night.
Yeah.
There are problems that human minds cannot really come to terms with, grasp. You can think of it like quantum computing, for example, right?
Yes.
Those particular problems might have answers that artificial intelligence might be able to consider. Because obviously they're going to be operating and using their intellect in ways that are going to be many times many times more powerful and on a way wider scale than anything that we could come up with. We've got the
hardware for it.
Yeah. I mean, like, they might be able to come up with something, like, in 10 years that would take 100 years for a human. For a group of humans to develop and work on. And so I think that, like, that's the most positive outlook for AI. I just think that if you're going to have artificial intelligence, I think that there needs to be some sort of separation between the duties that we might ask of AI or employ of AI that doesn't strip the definition and meanings behind humans, people. Because if we do that, then we're going to go down a road that I don't think we can come back from.
Okay.
All right. Well, if you guys have any future comments or things you'd like to say about this, feel free to use the comment section. If you'd like to know more or have, like, any questions that maybe I didn't answer, feel free to email the show at awickedparley@gmail.com. And I hope that this has been fun and engaging. I appreciate your comments, Kyle. It was nice to see them. Hopefully we see more comments in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I hope you guys all have a great night and an awesome Halloween. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. Good night, everybody.